All right. Today's guest is a super interesting guest. He is one of the leading scholars in Ericksonian therapy. He's traveled all around the world teaching hypnosis, teaching psychology. He's author of 4 books. Actually, he was my therapist for a while, helped me through some of the darkest times of my life. One of the most interesting people, if not the most interesting person I know. Today's guest is none other than Dr. Dan Short. All right, Dr. Short, welcome to the Real Results Podcast.
Hi, Levi. Glad to be here.
So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit about who you are?
As you introduced me, I am a licensed psychologist practicing here in Arizona. I am a author of 4 different books. I am a teacher who likes to work with other psychologists, sometimes with physicians, sometimes with psychiatrists, sometimes with business people, in what things can be done to improve the quality of people's lives around them.
Yeah, I love that, man. Okay, so you sent me your book a few weeks ago to go through it. So it's centered around this idea of the Ericksonian choice architecture. Now, you're one of the leading people in the Ericksonian therapy, right? So what is ECA is the abbreviation?
So if you've never heard of Ericksonian choice architecture before, it's probably because this is the first podcast on it and the first book about it hasn't been published yet. But it's been around. I mean, it's based on the work of Milton H. Erickson, who, when he was living in the 50s and 60s, and even on into the 70s, he was considered the world's greatest hypnotist. And he was just able to work with people in ways that are just jaw-dropping when you read his casework. And it almost seemed like as if there was no case too hard for him to somehow help, whether the person had catatonic schizophrenia or whatever the problem might be.
Yeah.
Delusions that they're Jesus Christ or all these incredible things he was able to work with. He framed his work in terms of hypnosis. He taught all of his students how to do what he did in terms of hypnosis and using the language of suggestion and hypnosis. But ironically, people who would study his work, me being one of them, and others, noticed that he very rarely used hypnotic inductions. And so people would call it conversational hypnosis because he would just be talking to someone as you and I are talking right now and still achieve these remarkable outcomes. And so, people have been studying him very in depth since at least 1980. A lot of therapists getting trained as Ericksonian therapists, and people understand Erickson from a hypnosis perspective, but I wasn't satisfied with that, or even this concept of conversational hypnosis, because I'm like, it's something different and it doesn't require trance. So people don't need to be zoned out and their eyes closed in order for all of these effects to be taking effect.
Right.
I was like, it's something else. And so I did write a book on trying to get close to the concept in 2020. I called it Unconscious Process Work. The idea that people have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, and that they operate differently. And if you'll just talk to the unconscious mind, you can discover potential and resources within the individual that their conscious mind won't be, if they make it a conscious goal, they won't be able to make it happen.
Yeah.
Let me give you a very, very simple example of this.
Yeah.
You go, so I have a client who is freaking out with anxiety, having panic attacks, very concerned that he could die of cancer. And he's a trained psychologist. He didn't believe in psychics. However, his wife, who had cheated on him and who had divorced him, had gone to a psych. She was bitter, I guess. She went to a psychic and then came back and told him, the psychic told me that you're going to die in 5 years of colon cancer. And he was like, Dan, I'm obsessing on this. I can't get it out of my head. I don't believe in psychics. I think it's BS. But just from anxiety alone, I'm probably going to develop a somatic reaction. He goes, you've got to help me. And and this is not something his conscious mind can control. And it doesn't matter that he didn't logically believe in it. It was he was losing sleep, and he was genuinely scared he was going to get cancer. Self-fulfilling prophecy, where you fear something bad enough, you make it happen. I said, describe the words of that psychic again to me. Tell me through the whole thing through again. So he quoted what his wife had told him about these different things the psychic had said. And I was like, you know what? That's a 2-bit psychic if ever I heard the words of a 2-bit psychic. This
2-bit psychic.
2-bit, doesn't know what she's doing.
Okay.
A Texas expression, 2-bit. This woman clearly has no clue what she's doing. Fortunately for you, I happen to know a very competent psychic. She's one of the best in the country, I think. And I've had many clients come back from working with her, and she named things spot on. And, a few months later, a year later, everything happened exactly as she described.
Yeah.
Her name's Brandy. I think you should go meet with Brandy and have her tell you your future. He was like, you're being serious. And I was like, yeah. He goes, one psychologist to another. You're being serious. I was like, yes, I am. This guy used to do research at high levels. So he's like, okay, I'll do that. So then I was going to go do a speech with the daughter of Milton Erickson, Roxana Erickson. So we're in our car going somewhere, and I get a phone call. And so I put it on speaker. I'm like, hello, Dan Short. And he goes, hi, I'm Brandy. And I was like, oh, Brandy the psychic. And she said, yes. And she goes, you referred a client to me? And I was like, yeah. She goes, is there anything in particular, that you're I should be aware of? And I was like, no, not a threat to himself. There's no suicidal, nothing like that. Right. Just treat him like you would any other client. So Roxana looks over at me and said, you referred a client to a psychic? And I was like, in this case, it made sense.
In this case, yeah.
And she had predicted that within 4 months, he would be dating a very beautiful woman, someone that would make his wife very jealous, that within a year, he would have started a brand new business and would be working with people from out of state that had deep pockets. And she made 2 or 3 predictions like that. And sure enough, 4 months later, he was dating this.
No way.
Yeah, it was in a restaurant where his ex-wife happened to come and see him with this arm candy, I guess, essentially. It didn't end up, that relationship didn't last long term, but it achieved its purposes. Yeah. And then later he met someone else that was a better fit for him. But he did have someone contact him from out of state. They did start this new business. Everything came to fruition that Brandy had predicted.
Wow.
So and all the anxiety about dying of cancer, it was gone because she was like, no, that's not in your future.
That is crazy.
Have a long life. So now there may be some of you, we've recently learned in a Consumer Reports that people report higher consumer satisfaction with psychics than they do with counselors and therapists. Why is that? Psychics are doing something very powerful.
Okay.
They may not even know they'll be doing it, but it's very helpful. Because let's say I'm advertising myself as a psychic and you come in to see me.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what are your struggles here? And you're saying, well, I recently got divorced or dumped by a girlfriend or whatever. And I say, well, within a year at a park, you're highly likely to meet a woman who's enthusiastic, engaging, and different from any woman you've ever dated before. And I'm getting a very strong feeling that she's the one. And that's my prediction. You leave with no performance anxiety, no pressure, no conscious goals, but all of a sudden you're going to the park more often. Not only are you going to the park more often,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
You're approaching females when you're at the park.
Yep. Yeah.
Is it a conscious goal? No, it's an unconscious goal.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things in that book I wrote on.
Have you heard of the Wim Hof method? The Iceman?
Okay.
Wim Hof. He basically he's incredible. Like he takes people out on these retreats.
Right.
In the in soup, like below freezing. Right. And he basically is an example that science isn't real. Basically, he broke all the rules of science. He can stay in freezing water for longer than science says you'll be able to survive. He's broken all the rules. They've hooked him up to wires. Scientists have studied this guy, And he just said, I train on it, yes, but it's the power of my mind. He works on his mind every day. How much of that is the same with if you get diagnosed with cancer, if you set a goal, or if you really truly convince your subconscious mind or even your conscious mind that you're going to get there, I feel like the percentage that you get there is way higher. For example, I just filmed a guy who got diagnosed with cancer for a third time. Mm-hmm. Super good guy, by the way. Like, he's my new friend. His name's Jeff, and we're filming him on a podcast talking about his story. He got diagnosed with cancer the first time. The doctor said he would die within a year. Guess what? He beat it. Second time, same thing. Even Dr. Google, right, as he likes to call it, Dr. Google said he would die in 2 years. He still doesn't believe it. He still doesn't believe it. And just recently, he got some more bad news, but he just doesn't believe in his mind that this, like, he knows that there's more for him in his mind. Like, he truly believes that. And I think that's so powerful. And almost all the people who keep that mindset through cancer, I think 90%, if not more of them, make it through it. But he started a business. He's making, 5 figures a month, succeeding through all of this. But it's really like the power of the mind, that gets you through these types of things. Wouldn't you believe that?
Yeah, they do have some science on this, especially one of the leading experts on this is Irving Kirsch. Wrote a book in 1990 about placebo effects, and then kind of tied it in with hypnosis, and this idea that you're changing people's expectations.
Yeah.
And so in that book, they describe one person, and this is anecdotal, but there's experiments backing all of this, but anecdotally, the guy was given a placebo, but told it was a very rare experimental drug that they thought could beat the cancer.
Yeah.
And so the guy's taking a placebo. It was just sugar or whatever, and he was making really great progress. Unfortunately, the doctor that had done this used the name of a real drug, even though that's not what the guy was being given. And the guy found information on the drug and found that it had failed in its clinical testing, and he died shortly after. There's also a discussion in the book of nocebo effects or iatrogenic disease, where a prediction from a doctor will create a bad outcome. And people who were told that they have some fatal disease, and then they die, and they do the autopsy, and they find out they were misdiagnosed. They did not have the disease.
Yeah. Yeah.
So expectations, positive or negative, can have a profound effect on us physically.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your book, you talk about choice over change. Mm-hmm. What's the distinction, and why is it so critical?
Yeah, and I'm writing that especially to other people that are trained in therapy or coaching or something like that. And starting back with Freud, there was this huge emphasis on change. And Freud wanted to change things that were inside people. Later, the behaviorist came along, and they wanted to use things like punishment or reward and reinforcement schedules and whatnot to change behavior. So they're trying to change. They were a little more pragmatically focused, and then they're like, well, let's just change the outcomes of what people are doing. And behaviorism was, found to be somewhat successful as long as you could control the environment. As long as you could control the rewards or the punishments, you could change people's behavior. But when you come in to see someone and they're like, okay, what are your change goals?
Yeah.
What needs to be different about who you are? It's unsettling. It can create a certain amount of performance anxiety, because it's like, well, now I have to not be me. Right.
Yeah.
Or I have to, and then the therapist is like, I see hesitation in your face. Maybe you're afraid of change, or maybe you're resisting change. So now you're being judged because you're resisting change. when you kind of at the, somewhere in your core, you're like, I think I'm best at being me. Like, I don't know if I can stop being me.
Yeah.
Right. And so it even if the person's not consciously disliking the idea of change, there is some research to suggest that it can create resistance at an unconscious level where you're actually pushing back against the person to try and preserve your sense of self, especially if you have certain biases towards status quo, right? You're a very sentimental person or a very conservative person and you like things staying the way they are.
Yeah.
This idea that for you to be okay, you have to change is a tough pill to swallow. And it sets people up for failure in many cases. Also, if I say you have to change, it implies, so I'm sending a message to your unconscious mind, something about you is broken or wrong. So who you are in your current state is broken or wrong. And when you shift your focus away from changing people, the other thing is it's a stupid concept. I mean, it makes no sense. One of the very first philosophers, long before Socrates, Heraclitus, one of the first big philosophies preserved in Western literature is this idea of flux and that life is a constant state of flux. And he's the one that came up with that saying, you never step in the same river twice, because everything's flowing along. So from day to day, when you wake up, you have a different body. People around you are different. The world around you is different. Everything's constantly changing. So to say that now all of a sudden you have to have change goals, in a way, ironically, is just saying, well, we're just doing more of the same because things are constantly changing anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not a really carefully thought out thing. It's surprising to me that psychologists have hung on to it for almost 100 years now, more than 100 years. When you shift your focus away from change to choice, it seems like you get more to what people need in order to thrive. Because once people feel that they have the choice to act on their values or to become who they wish to be or to have the marriage they wish to have or to raise the kids, people by nature go toward opportunity and positive choices. A few exceptions, if someone's maybe sociopathic, maybe this doesn't quite apply. So there's, nothing's always true. But most people, including people struggling with schizophrenia or things like that, once you empower them with choice, they tend to get better. You take, interestingly enough, serial killers, and you start asking about their behavior. I was left with no choice. Either I couldn't control the urge or society made me or whatever. Anytime you have horrific outcomes, war even, people will tend to go to, I was left with no choice.
Wow.
So once you empower people with the experience of choice, they tend to become the better version of themselves. So that's what I aim for when I'm working with people. I don't want to change you. I want to help you figure out how to live as the best version of yourself.
That brought up a story for me. Someone who I got to know about, her name's Vanessa recently. She is like now open about her story, but basically she was in the military in Africa. She got deployed in Africa. The story starts, her husband, abuses her, like pretty bad, like, brain damage, bruises all over, then flees the country, leaves her alone with no home, no car. She's in the hospital, like loses her vision. Like, this is bad. Like, she's just left all alone. And her whole life changed just kind of like in one day. She spent 3 days in the hospital and, it was traumatizing for her. And she got back to the US and she, went out one day after, getting with her support group, and she kind of started to feel better after a while. And for the first time, she sent a message to her counselor and said, he just sent a picture and said, hey, just so you know, I'm going to miss today's call. I'm out having fun with my aunts. And the counselor kind of knew that she had like changed for the first time. I'm kind of telling this out of order, but before that, the reason why the counselor was so happy was because before that, she actually went on a call when she was out with her aunts about a month earlier. And she's like, I feel like I'm not supposed to be having fun right now. Mm-hmm. Like she didn't have the permission. She didn't give herself the permission to have fun. Mm-hmm. You know, it was like she didn't have the choice, like you said. Mm-hmm. And that can be so like daunting and powerful. Like I've never kind of been in that situation, so I don't really understand it like you can, but maybe you can put that into words. It's like, why did she feel like she couldn't have fun in that instance?
Yeah. It's not knowing this person, you know, there's different reasons, you know, without knowing their background and whatnot. We have many reasons we end up where we're at. But in general, I can say, if you don't know that there's an option available, you don't know that you have a choice, then it's very hard to exercise that choice, right? And so sometimes if you've grown up, let's say you had a horrific childhood and you were depressed throughout the entire childhood and adolescence and whatnot. Now you're in your 20s or in your 30s or whatever, and you've been suicidal off and on for however long. You may not be aware that you have a choice to feel something other than depressed.
Right. Because that's all you've known.
It's all you've known. You don't know there's a door two. You know door one, you don't know door two.
It's like a Plato's cave. Have you heard of that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's like that. You know, like they stay in the cave. There's all dark and shadows. They find someone finally escapes. They want to go back to the dark cave because that's all they know. You know, so that's super interesting.
Yeah, I find I've had some surprising results when someone's describing some emotional state that they feel trapped in, and I just ask them, what would you rather be feeling instead? After they explain the anxiety or the depression or whatever it is, the grief or the self-hatred or whatever they're struggling with. If you, I say it this way, if you could walk into Walmart and pick any emotion off the shelf, right?
Yeah.
What would you choose? I had one woman, she'd been brutally raped and she'd been through that experience more than once. And couldn't get this out of her head. And I was like, if you could have picked any emotion to feel in regard to that moment, what would you choose? And she said, tranquility.
Tranquility. Wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, that was her choice. So we honored that choice, had her close her eyes, and we did some imagery work, and we kind of went through that experience again. But in this instance, or reliving of it, she was experiencing tranquility. It was something she survived, something that in the long run made her stronger, gave her purpose and direction in life, certainly in regard to protecting her children. Why not feel tranquility? You know?
Yeah. Do you ever, just kind of a side question, do you ever does this weigh on you being a psychologist, like hearing all these crazy stories?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. And I was just speaking to a client this morning. She was telling me about something she was struggling with, and but how her job involves law enforcement, and she's around very, very dangerous people. And she made the comment that, maybe I even need something like this. And I was like, yeah, there's certain people, if they grow up with a lot of domestic violence or alcoholism or things like that, and their adrenaline system is constantly high, when they become adults, they do best if their job involves a certain amount of intense drama or, right? Much better to deal with it at work as a police officer or as a ER doctor or whatnot than to be creating it unconsciously in your own home through fighting and whatnot, or constant moving year to year, or all the things that people do to kind of they call it recapitulation in psychoanalysis, but this idea of kind of unconsciously recreating the conditions of childhood and continuing to struggle with them. And then I said to her, if you hadn't become that, you could have also become a therapist. Another way of having a lot of stimulation with intense, in some cases, people wanting to kill themselves or wanting to go out and kill others or whatnot, but it's not your personal life.
Right. Yeah. I had an aunt who was a dispatcher, and she's like actually kind of like the most chill person in our family. It's crazy. But like she deals with like the chaos all day, but she comes home and has a great balance, you know? Like she's really chill about stuff. Even when our grandma was in the hospital, she was super calm about the whole situation. Yeah. Kind of calmed everyone down, you know? But it's interesting how some cases you can kind of bring that back home. But you know, I don't know. Maybe some people hold it in, right?
Well, I mean, are you talking about therapists or like dispatchers?
No, like
or
dispatchers or people in law enforcement. Like I feel like those people are like the most calm. Is that just because like they're trying to negate?
If they're in a healthy environment, they're going to have support systems available to them. If there's something that hits too close to home, they're gonna have breaks. They're not gonna be overloaded with the super intense stuff. Like it's gonna be given to them in a manageable way. If they're in an unhealthy setting where they're having to do too many hours, or there isn't support, then they could start experiencing burnout at a minimum, or what we call secondary PTSD, where they start having nightmares and PTSD symptoms themselves from the trauma they're being exposed to.
Yeah. So I want to get back to ECA because as I was reading through it, I kind of felt a lot of it was, I don't want to say manipulative.
No, go ahead and say it.
But like, I don't know. Do you think manipulation is the right way to explain it? Because like hypnosis in a way is kind of manipulative.
Yeah. So ECA, first of all, Ericksonian choice architecture. Let's just understand where the words come from. Milton Erickson started using hypnosis and whatnot and doing things in the 1930s. Yeah. So these things that I'm describing and everything, they're not brand new innovations. At least in this one person's work, they've been around since 1930 at least.
Yeah.
But the hypnosis conceptual framework didn't really explain what he was doing. It wasn't a good framework, and it's not until 2009 that Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein from behavioral economics and choices people are making around commercial goods and whatnot, or in regard to financial decisions and stuff, that conceptual framework, all of a sudden, it was like turning a light on in a dark room. And I was like, oh, that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
So like an example might be the one guy in the 1930s was walking around in the hospital where he was a psychiatrist, hospital grounds, wrapped in a sheet, telling everybody he's Jesus Christ. And so he's delusional and expected everybody to respond to him as Jesus Christ. So Milton Erickson, instead of arguing with him or trying to logically persuade him that he's a normal human being and not Jesus Christ, instead of doing that, he went on walks with him through the hospital grounds and looked at the trees and the green grass and just admired God's good creation and all the good that God intended to bring into the world. And then he saw some grass tennis courts, and they were very uneven and lumpy. And Erickson commented to Jesus Christ, surely God didn't intend for the doctors to have to play tennis on uneven courts. He's like, do you think there's anything, God sent you here as a servant of mankind. Do you think you could do something about these uneven tennis courts? And the guy said, yeah, I suppose I could. And so Erickson brought him some shovels and some rakes, and the guy worked and worked and worked to getting the tennis courts all level. And Erickson came back and admired the goodness of his work and said, you've done a good thing here, and I'm sure people will appreciate it. Then he happened to notice that Erickson noticed that the psychology lab needed bookshelves built for them. And he came to Jesus Christ again and said, wasn't Jesus Christ a carpenter? And he said, well, yes. And he said, they need some bookshelves in the psychology lab. Would you be up to building this? And the guy said, I think I should be. And so this time he came without his sheet, and he started building the bookshelves. And then he started working as a handyman in general for that lab, became a valued contributing member of the community. Doctors respected him and appreciated him. People talked to him in normal ways. He stopped calling himself Jesus Christ, went back to using his name, eventually was released from the hospital. Erickson tried to explain that in terms of hypnosis, but there was no hypnosis really. There was no transcenduction. There was no trance as these things were happening. It wasn't an adequate conceptual framework to make sense of it. Choice architecture does explain those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So choice architecture is what's involved when, conversations like you and I are having right now, where if there was some good or benefit that I saw that I could bestow on you, without speaking directly to your conscious intentions and conscious goals, I could do something like make a prediction. And like, each year that these podcasts go by that you're doing, you're going to find something new developing as the skills you keep increasing. You just get better and better at this. And it's a comment, but it's a comment that actually is capable of instilling unconscious goals. Because it wasn't something you were told to do. It's just me making a comment, but your unconscious mind hears it.
Yeah.
And if it has emotional appeal to you, if it fits with your values and where your emotional positioning is at the time, it'll become almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's because our unconscious mind or intelligence can pursue goals without conscious intention being involved. That's why you're able to drive somewhere and not know how you got where you ended up. It was a goal being held at unconscious levels.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that story of like the lumpy tennis courts, you know, like, do you think that was, the first step is creating the optimal choice environment. No. Do you think that's what he was doing?
Yeah. Because
by walking him through?
That's a term I have, an optimal choice environment. We're going to get back to this concept of manipulation. But the idea is that I'm not trying to manipulate you, and I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. I'm trying to create an optimal choice environment for you where you control who you are, you decide who you are, you do you.
Yeah.
And so let's say you're a secretary, and let's say that you're wanting to have a nice trim body and don't want to eat a whole lot of chocolate, that would throw your diet. And if I have the client chocolate bowl sitting on the edge of your desk, that's going to create a problem for you. Yeah. Now, this is not hypnosis. This is just choice architecture. If I walk in and I take that bowl and I move it 6 feet from your desk over to a file cabinet and I set it there, 6 feet, that creates a more optimal choice environment in which your amount of candy eating that you do is likely to decrease by 40%. They've done this research.
Is actual study?
It's actual study. They just had secretaries. They moved the candy bowl 6 feet on a filing cabinet, reduced consumption by 40%.
Wow.
That's an optimal choice environment. The technique is called temptation distancing. The more distancing we do, most of us have heard about Angela Duckworth of the book, best-selling book on grit. If you haven't checked out Angela Duckworth's work, she's amazing. She's on podcast all the time. I don't know if she has her own, but she's a guest. And she's now doing a study where they're measuring the physical distance between high school students and their cell phone while they're doing homework. And they're finding out that you can predict their grades based on the physical distance between them and their cell phone. The kids that have the highest grades,
crazy.
Kids that tend to be straight A students have their cell phone in another room.
Wow.
It's not physically present with them.
Wow.
So that's temptation distancing. That's one of the first, there's a bunch of these examples, but like one of them, I got to see this when I was in the Amsterdam airport and I went into the men's bathroom and lo and behold, there's one of the earliest experiments in choice architecture. In the urinals, they have a little fly at the very middle of the urinals.
And you try to aim it there. Yep.
What they found is it reduced the spillage and grossness of the floors by 80%.
100%. Yeah.
80%.
Yeah.
That is an optimal choice environment. You just put that fly in the center of the urinal.
Oh yeah, because us guys, the guys watching know you always try to aim for that fly.
Like a little target.
Yeah.
Right. And so that there was one example, this one wasn't published work, but it was they had some hill where bikers could come down and then there's a road right in front of it and they needed to make a really sharp 90-degree turn in order not to hit the cars. and there wasn't a distinct curb, and people were going too wide and hitting cars. And there was a wreck. I don't remember how many wrecks each week, but it was bikers hitting cars. Mm-hmm. Someone came along with a blue piece of duct tape and just put a curve around on the sidewalk when it starts up the hill, and where the rider could see it curving around, that kept you in the middle of the sidewalk. And they measured the amount of wrecks with cars after putting that piece of tape down, reduced by 80%.
Huh.
That is an optimal choice environment. You're not controlling the bikers. You're not manipulating the bikers. You're really not. You're creating an optimal choice environment and letting people make what choices they'll make.
So like if someone's trying to quit cigarettes, you think?
You create an optimal choice environment and they either quit or they don't. But let me tell you what manipulation is. Manipulation is always a one-way street, in that the manipulator it gets advantage at the cost of the manipulated person.
Got it.
Right? So that's like con artist or used car salesman who manipulation typically involves lying.
Right.
I'm selling you a great car when I know I'm selling you a lemon. It can involve coercion, where you're making people feel, because blackmail or something, they have no choice but to do this. So they're being manipulated.
Right.
People who are manipulating you never want you to know what they're doing, or don't want to be known about it in public, because it's you abusing or taking advantage of someone, and it's you protecting your own interest at the expense of theirs.
Right.
So choice architecture does not do that.
Because it's their choice. It's not
their
something
choice. There's transparency. There's one method. This one sounds kind of like, really, what? But there's one called pre-commitment, where you have a person commit before they know what they're committing to, that they're going to do whatever you tell them.
Yeah.
And it really intensifies things. And it gets you outcomes you wouldn't get. And it seems like you're taking choice away from the person, because a pre-commitment might be, will you do everything I say with absolute obedience and not question any of it? Right?
Yeah.
And will you answer every question I ask, no matter how probing it is?
Yeah.
And then do whatever I tell you to do afterwards. Are you willing to say yes to that? If you say yes, I think I can help you. If you say no, that's fine. That's your choice. I don't think I can help you. So even though it seems like you're taking choice away from the person with pre-commitment, you are actually giving them a choice. And if the person pre-commits, everything that happens afterwards, even though you're guiding it and creating the structure, it's by their choice that it's happening. So they actually get to own it, even though they're kind of, quote, submitting.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of how I use this. I was volunteering with some doctors and nurses that flew out to the jungles of Haiti, where there was a little village where there's no medical care. There's no running water. There's no police officers. There's just people struggling for survival.
Right.
75% unemployment, and one person has a job. They're trying to feed 10 people in their home. That was the case for this little Haitian woman that was brought to me. She was crying. She was about to lose her job any day. She couldn't lift her arms. She could only work for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. She'd have to sit down. And the reason for this was because someone who was jealous of her and jealous of her job had gone to a witch doctor, paid that person a big sum of money to cast a spell on her, a voodoo curse. And the voodoo curse took away her power and ability to do her job, which was to sweep the floors. So she couldn't hold a broom and sweep for more than 5 or 10 minutes. She was feeding 10 people in her home, trying to keep her family alive. And that was the only job they had. And she was about to lose it to this woman. So I had like a 14-year-old Haitian girl that was translating for me. This woman didn't speak English, but she was there crying in front of me. And I said, I can help you, but you're going to have to do everything I ask you to do. Will you do everything I ask you to do? And she nodded her head, and I was like, and I'm going to ask you a question, and you must give me an absolute honest answer.
Yeah.
And when you give me the answer, really mean the answer. Are you willing to do that? She said, yes. And I said, do you believe in God? And the setting is like the place I was volunteering at was run by missionaries. And there's like this open air chapel. You can see the banana trees and everything right outside the windows, but we're in a chapel, open air on a bench. And I said, "Do you believe in God?" And she shook her head vigorously. And I said, "Then tell me show me with your hand, where is God?"
Pointed up.
Her hand lifted effortlessly in the air.
Yeah.
The arms that she hadn't been able to lift for a couple of weeks now. I said, "The spell's broken. You can go back to work." And she thanked me, and she walked with complete her own power. She was confident. She was fine.
Which doctor, though?
A voodoo doctor, yes.
A voodoo? Do you believe that's real?
We've got documented cases of voodoo death where they place a curse and the person dies a little bit later.
I thought that was all fake.
That was what they wanted me there for most. Most of the people I was working with had curses they needed removed. So
That's absolutely crazy.
They didn't have a word for psychologist there in that village, so they just called me the American head doctor. But I got the reputation.
Head doctor.
The American head doctor could remove curses. Voodoo curses are no different than when a American medical doctor tells you have such and such disease and you're likely to die in a month, and you die in a month. And then they do an autopsy and find out you didn't have the disease.
So it's all placebo?
It's no different.
That's crazy, man. I mean, she must have been so panicked. No?
She was, this was life.
I mean, because if you,
her.
yeah, right. Because if you truly believe that, yeah.
She couldn't lift her arms. And so that question, point to God, freed her from the curse, because now she was defying it with her own actions, which made it no longer legitimate or real.
I mean, you've dealt with, I'm sure, some crazy stuff, I mean, like with me, you helped me through the most traumatizing moment in my life. I don't know if we want to get into it today, but it was traumatizing for me. There was guns involved. It was a life or death situation. And, I had anxiety about it, and you helped me calm down. You're really good at that. I mean, as I was reading your book, you even had someone who was diagnosed with 2 forms of cancer.
It was a given that he was going to die. And so because he came to me from Mayo, and the doctors were like, "You've got X amount of time. You're going to die." Because a lot of what I do when I'm working with people, I try to restore the experience of choice. How do you restore the experience of choice when a person's going to die of cancer?
Yeah.
But I find that you can, even under conditions where people are thrown into concentration camps or facing execution. There's ways of restoring the experience of choice.
You gave them 2 choices, right?
In which you die. Yeah. The tactic that I used from behavioral economics is known as asymmetric dominance.
Asymmetric dominance
is what it's called. And you see it in the movie theater every single time you go to get popcorn. You'll have a small size for $1, and then you'll have a medium size for $1.80, and then a big size for $3.
Yeah.
And which one are you going to buy? You always buy the one for $3 because it's such a good deal.
Yeah.
Right? It's just 20 cents more or whatever than the medium.
Yeah.
Then the Coca-Cola or whatever, they price things that way in sets of 3. And the third one really is just a decoy. They're not even trying to sell the medium size. The medium size is there to get you to buy the large rather than buying the small. Yeah. Because the large looks like such a good deal compared to the medium.
They teach that in business too.
That's asymmetric dominance, right? Yeah, this is all business stuff. I've seen behavioral economics, which is where choice architecture comes from. It's being applied to government now. And it's being applied to things outside of marketing.
Right.
But it's also being now, at least in my work, applied to clinical context and therapy and things like that. That's what I've done. I'm translating it into, this is what it looks like in therapy. And so, with this individual, he at first was diagnosed with MDS, and that's a form of bone cancer where your bone marrow starts swelling, and you don't die quickly. It's a slow death, prolonged over a long period of time, which is the most excruciating pain you can know. It's literally the center of your bones, and there's no painkiller that knocks the pain out. Yeah. It's not a good thing. And he was diagnosed with this, and then along comes leukemia, you got a second cancer, and it's a more fast-moving form of leukemia. The doctor just told him that he would probably die of that, and soon. And so I asked him, I was like, given a choice, would you rather die, slowly from MDS, or somehow I turned it into three choices. Now I'm not remembering the third choice, but the MDS, or with the leukemia and quickly, or slowly from leukemia, or quickly from leukemia. And he was like, a quick death with leukemia. Right. So I don't suffer, because he was very fearful of pain. And so what we did was it reframed the situation into where what was a probable outcome for him was his choice. That is what he wanted. He didn't want to die of MDS slowly. He didn't want to die of leukemia slowly. If he had to die of cancer, he wanted it to be fast-moving leukemia and be finished. So I had him completely okay with his death. We were joking about things. We were talking about how many months he probably had left, what he wanted to do to set his wife up to be in good shape when he's not there. And then they get this experimental therapy that they thought he was a good candidate for, where they take out his bone marrow and put in someone else's bone marrow, who their cellular structure, their immune systems are fight off the particular cancer that he had, right? Incompatible with that cancer. And so they did it. They took all the blood out of his body, put in the other man's blood from Europe, and it killed the cancer. I think it's been 6 years now. I talked to him not long ago. 6 years later, he's doing great.
What? So you think by giving him the choice that kind of manifested something positive happening for him?
I'm not attributing his success with experimental therapy to me. We did get him in a much better emotional state of mind. He was at peace, and he wasn't panicking. He wasn't losing sleep. He wasn't.
I think really from all of this, the conclusion really is that if you're in a state of panic and anxiety, manifestation is real. Like, if you're believing that the bad thing is going to happen, it's almost always going to happen. I feel like that's the conclusion.
That idea of self-fulfilling prophecy. There's a lot of things that happen because we put energy into them. Even if we don't want them to happen, if we're scared enough about them or obsessing enough on it, we'll kind of lead ourselves in that direction, and we end up doing things to make it happen, unfortunately.
What about like everyday situations, like the fear of failure, for example? Like, that's something that I told you before the podcast that I really wanted to talk about, because I deal with that. The fear of failing, because even last week I had a guest on, a friend from high school, my age. We're both business owners, but we both kind of have this subconscious pressure that if we fail, it's suddenly the worst thing that's ever going to happen in our lives, right? That fear of failure, especially as a young entrepreneur, because this is all I've known. I've been creating videos since I was 8 years old. And I feel like if I fail at this, I've worked my whole life towards it, and boom, it's going to be the worst thing that's ever happened. So it's something that I deal with a lot. Tried to, come more at peace with the self, and trying to tell myself everything's going to be okay. But how do you deal with that in more everyday situations?
No, not an everyday situation, but let me give you an example of when I use this intentionally. I was 25, 26 years old. Fresh from my master's program, going from being a student, trying to learn how to help people, to my first job, which is a domestic violence shelter, or not a shelter, but a domestic violence agency. Men were seen separately from women, and I was there to see the men. In many cases, these guys have been put in jail for beating someone violently, in some cases beating their children. This wasn't unserious stuff. These were people's lives were on the line. Some people ended up getting stabbed to death in front of their children. I mean, there's bad outcomes that occurred. And I was a 25, 26-year-old kid some cases meeting with people twice my age with this sort of burden of the world on me, right? And I'd have someone that I was going to do an intake with, and I wouldn't know who I was going to confront. You know, I had in one case a guy pulled out a knife on me. I had different things happen. And one day I was walking into work. It was 9 a.m. or whatnot, and I was reaching for the door where I normally go into work, and my hand was like shaking a little bit, and my hand wouldn't go forward. My body literally didn't want to go through the door. I had a new intake, and I was just uncertain of what I was going to face. And then there's the burden of responsibility that came with it too, and kind of who am I to be doing this stuff? And so I just stood there at that door to the office, and I said, okay, Dan, with this intake and with everyone you meet with today, just do lousy work. Like, don't do anything unethical, don't do anything to harm anybody, but do a quality of counseling that is so minimal that they're really not likely to benefit one iota. Just one day of being a super bad therapist.
Yeah.
Right,
That's called anchoring low, right?
Anchoring
Just so we
low.
have the
I anchored
term.
really low. I'm not going to do any harm, but I'm going to do no benefit.
Right.
So I'm sitting at my desk. The guy comes in. He's a bodybuilder guy. Like he's pounding on my desk. The veins are popping out of his forehead. He's so angry about, the system and what white people are doing to oppress, and here I'm a white guy, and I'm part of the oppressive system. But I was like, he finished, kind of yelling his stuff. And I was like, you make some good points. I was like, people, unfortunately, our culture is oriented to overprivileged white people who take advantage of, it's like, and how often do we look at the contributions of really amazing people like Martin Luther King Jr. Or I started naming off all these historical figures that have done incredible things, but people who are also extraordinary people of character.
Okay.
And so I started kind of taking his argument away from him, which is another tactic called steel manning. They use that in debate, where you start debating the other person's position for them. And they go into this strangely kind of passive place because they want to hear what you think as you're arguing their position for them.
Yeah.
And then I started going into when's the last time he came home and to see his children smile or want to greet him at the door. And he couldn't remember a time like that. And I was like, how would you like it this week if you have your children come up and greet you at the door, smiling and happy to see you, and your wife smiling and happy to see you? And the guy got really emotional. He's like tearing up. And I was like, I can help you get there. You just need to do these things. And I promise you'll get there. And because I could tell it was a workable situation. The guy wasn't sociopathic. There was, he didn't have the skills he needed. And I told him some very specific things to do. And he came back 2 weeks later or whatnot and was thanking me and telling me, sure enough, his kids and wife had been waiting for him at the door when he came home and hugged him. And he couldn't remember the last time that happened. He cried in my office, telling me how meaningful it was. And all of that was after I anchored low and told myself I was going to do zero beneficial therapy.
Yeah, but that got you through the door, to open the door. And
sometimes we're trying too hard.
Yeah.
And we get in our own way when we try too hard. When you're trying too hard, you need not anchor higher. That just is more of the problem. You need to anchor lower.
Yeah.
And then you'll find your unconscious mind taking over and doing things that consciously you wouldn't have figured out anyway that are far better, right? It's like athletes call being in the zone, right? They decided this game, I'm going to stop pushing myself so much. I'm just going to go out there and have fun. And they play the best game of their career and they're in the zone. They're making all these shots and everything. That actually can come from anchoring low. You wouldn't think it, but that gets into the next concept is the whole reason why choice architecture really matters. With human beings, there's this thing called the paradox of power.
Okay.
And the paradox of power is this: the more I lean on you and the more likely I try to push you in the corner, the more likely you are to push back or to fight back against me. It's just a thing.
Resistance,
Right. So when we're really trying to make someone do something, we're creating a lot of pushback and a lot of, or people may even, not that they're trying to like, I'm going to resist them, but they could just even be overwhelmed and they can't cooperate with you even if they wanted to because you're overwhelming them.
Yeah. It's like it's not their choice.
You're coming at them too hard. And so
It happens a lot with parenting too.
one way to think of this is if you'll think of it like a continuum. On this continuum, you have total freedom and you have no freedom. With the no freedom, you have coercion. That's when like courts throw you in prison, or that's when someone puts a gun up to you and says, give you my wallet, or when someone's going to blackmail you and say, do everything I say, or I'm going to release this information. The coercion, the whole purpose of coercion is to take away the experience of choice from you,
Right.
and to make you believe and feel that you cannot exercise choice.
Yeah.
So that's coercion at the far end. In the middle, where freedom feels more like a 50-50 proposition, is persuasion. So you and me have a talk, and I'm so persuasive and I argue with such strong logic that you're forced to agree with me.
Right.
And it wasn't what you were thinking, it's what I'm thinking, but now you have to abandon your position and go with my position because it's the only logical thing, or because I was so persuasive. And there's some freedom in that, but it's still clearly me putting something on you.
Yeah.
With choice architecture, with a little fly in the urinal, or me doing steel manning and taking over your argument for you so that we can work together cooperatively, there is no persuasion.
Yeah.
Choice architecture does not involve conscious persuasion. It's just a matter of creating a more optimal choice environment for the person, like putting the candy 6 feet away, and you
Right.
let them make whatever choice they need to make.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. I just had a conversation yesterday about this with my dad. You know, he was helping my little brother with a school project. I get a call from him, and he's like, hey, you know, can you tell Dante, my little brother? He said, can you tell Dante that I know what I'm doing when it comes to video? And I'm like, why? He's like, he won't listen to me on this school project. Like, I'm telling him what to do. I've been doing this my whole life and he's not wanting to do it. And I'm like, I mean, I can't tell him to do it, but look, I listen to you when you tell me stuff like about video. I ask him all the time about video. And so whatever, I told Dante, just listen to him, hang up the phone. I'm like, I think Dad, I think you're a little too hard on him, because it's almost like he's telling him what to do. The more you tell, especially a kid, what to do, the less they're going to want to do it. It's just, I feel like that's basic psychology.
It's called the paradox of power.
Paradox of power.
The more you exercise it, the less power you're likely to, or less influence you're going to have.
Right.
Or at
Do
least
you
in the direction
think
you want.
so? You think surrender is the answer to that? You think that's kind of
If you're caught in a power struggle with someone, sometimes the best thing you can do is surrender.
but that's hard for people, no? Like who want, like say for a CEO, right? Who's telling someone, one of their employees to do something. It's going to be kind of hard for them to surrender to that in order to
Let's take a real life
not
example.
get the pushback, right?
Let's take a real life example. Let's take
Yeah.
Domino's Pizza back in the 90s. I don't remember the exact date, but at some point, Domino's Pizza developed a hardcore reputation for being pizza that tastes like cardboard and something that is too gross to eat almost.
Right.
And so they came out with this marketing campaign where they started doing a taste test of their pizza. People were saying it was disgusting, and they were marketing this.
No way. They leaned into it. Yeah.
Yeah, they leaned into it, and they were like, we've got to get rid of this stuff. And so then it became this whole series of ads where you see the CEO and whoever trying to find, meeting with chefs, trying to figure out what they can do to improve the flavor of their pizza. And finally, they landed on who they thought was the best formula, the best recipe. Then they do their taste test again, and people are loving it. And sure enough, in reality, Domino's significantly increased the quality of its product, and it was a huge success.
Wow.
That is an example of what we call tactical surrender.
I love that, man. I love that, being a marketer. I love that, man. Lastly, I want you to share where people can find you, your book that we talked about some of the principles today. First, I want you to, as kind of something I ask every guest, I want you to leave people with one lesson. What's the main thing you want people to leave this podcast with? The main lesson?
Yeah, I mean, studying choice architecture, it's taught me a lot about relationships. It's taught me a lot about myself. Sometimes we try to control the people around us. It's just always going to end poorly. The more, if you came from an anxious, chaotic, disturbed childhood, it makes relationships scary for us. And so we tend to want to try to control the people in our lives that matter to us. But I'm going to tell you that it's going to do more harm than good. It's going to create more trouble. People are kind of like wild stallions. They're really meant to live free. Yeah. And so what you want to do is you want to be honest with people. You want to try to embrace them as their own free agents. And then you want to find out what their core values are. And sometimes that's all you need to do. When you ask people, when psychologists have people just list 6 of their most core values. And after the person lists those core values, they pull them in another room and they give them some critical feedback on a task they've done. They're far less likely to become defensive and way more likely to learn from the feedback than people who didn't just sit and list their core values.
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of times, very few people have as their core value, I want to destroy you in this relationship, or I want to make your life miserable. Like,
some do.
Yeah. They're sadistic or something, or if they feel like you're the enemy and they got to get back at you. But in many cases, when I was doing that domestic violence work, most guys, they wanted to be able for the other person to feel like they loved them.
Yeah.
And they wanted the person to love them back. And that was a core value. I want a loving home.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when you just ask a person, what is your core value? And whatever their core value is, if you say, okay, well, let's work toward that. Or, oh yeah, I share that same value. Like that's a value of mine too. What can we do to work toward that? And you just you treat them as an equal. You treat them as someone who's capable of problem solving like you. But also like a creature that's meant to live free, you get better results. And the same with yourself. If you're trying to force yourself to be someone you're not, trying to force yourself to succeed at something that's not right for you.
Yeah.
If you're trying to pursue, let's say you convinced yourself by age 30 you have to have made your first $2 million or whatever the thing is, you're not likely to be that happy actually.
Yeah, because you're driving yourself through hatred. Hatred of yourself. Yeah. And
you're rejecting yourself. And if, let's say you get the money, let's say you get the fame, let's say you get the power, the more and more we indulge in trying to achieve everything we want, the harder it becomes to feel good about the things that are occurring, right? Once you own a Ferrari and a whatever, Lamborghini, and you own, you got one of those buildings that houses all of your extra, sports cars you've bought, it becomes really hard to get excited about a car.
Yeah.
And so ironically, as people overindulge, they take away the ability to feel like they can exercise choice and feel good about their choices. So you don't need to live your life focused on how do I get everything I want? And this interaction with this person next to me, how do I get everything I want out of this interaction? You're way better off just chilling, being aware of what your values are, trying to live into those values, finding out what their values are, showing up as someone who wants to collaborate with them, be a friend, and respect their right to freedom, and you get the best outcomes that way.
Wow, man. That's so powerful. I love that. Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much, man. I feel like I was just sitting here soaking up all the information of your brilliance. Thank you for coming on. Where can people find you? This book isn't out yet, right?
Right. Yeah, if you're, I write for people that are professionals in helping relationships. So if you're a nurse, if you're a therapist, certainly, if you do coaching, if you do negotiation work, you're an attorney, these kinds of things this book would be very useful to you. Probably the title will be Ericksonian Choice Architecture, and then with some subtitle, and then you'll see the name Dan Short on it, and hopefully it'll be out within a year. That's my goal.
Yeah. And what about your other books? I mean, you have other books as well.
The one I wrote, I think published in 2021. It has some of this information in it. It was very much written for therapists. The title is Making Psychotherapy More Effective with Unconscious Process Work. It's actually got some of the same concepts and techniques. I just hadn't yet discovered the choice architecture framework and all of that research. That came right after I wrote that book. So you'll find some of these things that I was talking about with prediction and things called mental contrasting and some interesting concepts. If you're not a therapist, but you like to read about what therapists, how they get trained and what they do, then this might be a book of interest to you.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Been a great pleasure.
Until next time.